Chosen one, there are moments when God does not ask you to understand what He is doing. He simply asks you to watch, to become still, to stop reaching for explanations, stop chasing people for answers, and stop trying to force open doors that He has already decided to open in His own time. Right now, something is shifting behind what you can see. You may not have evidence yet, but heaven is already moving. What looked delayed is being rearranged. What looked impossible is being prepared. And God is saying to you, watch this alone right now. Not because you are forgotten, but because what I am about to reveal will make you understand why I needed you to wait. Chosen one, listen carefully, because this message is not about what happened yesterday. It is not even primarily about what you see around you today. This is about what is happening beneath the surface while you are standing in a season that has tested your patience, your faith, your confidence, and sometimes even your ability to believe that anything good could still happen for you. You have been looking at the silence and wondering whether God heard you. You have been looking at the delay and wondering whether the promise was real. You have been looking at certain people moving forward while you seem to remain in the same place, and somewhere inside your heart you asked, Lord, when will it finally be my turn? But God wants you to understand something. You were never being overlooked. You were being positioned. There is a difference between being delayed and being prepared. There is a difference between being rejected and being redirected. There is a difference between being forgotten and being hidden. And there is a difference between losing something and being protected from something that would have cost you far more than you could see at the time. Chosen one, some doors had to close because they were connected to a version of you that God is no longer allowing to exist. Some relationships had to become distant because you were trying to carry people into a future they were never assigned to enter with you. Some opportunities disappeared because they would have given you temporary comfort while keeping you permanently distracted from your greater purpose. You called it loss. God called it preparation. You called it loneliness. God called it separation. You called it waiting. God called it training. You called it silence. God called it instruction. And now you are approaching a moment where the meaning of the previous season will begin to become clearer. This is why God is saying, watch this. Not panic, not run, not prove yourself, not convince everybody. Watch. There is power in watching when God is working. There is maturity in refusing to interfere with something you have prayed for. There is faith in remaining still when your emotions are demanding immediate action. You have spent so much time trying to make things happen that God is teaching you how to recognize what happens when He moves. Because when God moves, you will not have to manipulate it. You will not have to beg for it. You will not have to convince the right people. You will not have to chase it down until you are exhausted. What belongs to your assignment will begin to recognize you. The right opportunity will carry a different kind of peace. The right connection will not require you to abandon yourself. The right door will not demand that you compromise everything God taught you during your hidden season. And the right blessing will not require you to become someone you were never created to be. Chosen one, there is something powerful about the person who has learned to stop forcing what God has not authorized. You are becoming that person. You are learning that not every invitation deserves your yes. Not every message deserves your response. Not every accusation deserves your defense. Not every misunderstanding deserves your explanation. Not every person deserves access to your heart. And not every battle deserves your energy. Some battles are distractions disguised as emergencies. Some people will try to pull you back into conversations that God already brought you out of. Some situations will attempt to make you react because they know that your reaction can interrupt your peace. But God is teaching you restraint. You are beginning to understand that silence can be an answer. Distance can be wisdom. Boundaries can be obedience. And walking away can sometimes be the greatest demonstration of faith. You do not have to stand in front of every door and explain why you deserve to enter. If God opens it, you will know. If God closes it, you will eventually understand. And if God tells you to wait, then waiting is not wasted time. Chosen one, think about how much has changed inside you during the season when nothing seemed to change around you. You became more discerning. You stopped believing every promise people made. You stopped confusing attention with love. You stopped confusing popularity with purpose. You stopped measuring your value by who remembered you, who invited you, who called you, or who stayed. You discovered that you could survive being misunderstood. You discovered that you could stand alone without becoming empty. You discovered that solitude can reveal things about your character that crowds never could. And perhaps most importantly, you discovered that God can become your stability when everything else becomes uncertain. That discovery was not accidental. That was part of the preparation. Because the blessing you are praying for requires a version of you who knows how to carry it. Imagine receiving everything you once asked for while still carrying the insecurity, fear, impulsiveness, and desperation of your former self. You might sabotage what you prayed for. You might hold on to people who were supposed to leave. You might make decisions from fear. You might mistake every opportunity for destiny. You might give away what God entrusted to you because you were still desperate for approval. So God did something you did not understand. He slowed you down. He isolated you. He allowed certain things to disappoint you. He allowed some people to reveal themselves. He allowed plans to fail. He allowed you to sit in uncertainty long enough that you finally stopped depending on circumstances to tell you who you were. And now you are different. Chosen one. You may not feel different every day, but you are. The old you would have responded immediately. The new you pauses. The old you would have chased. The new you watches. The old you would have begged. The new you prays. The old you needed everyone to understand. The new you can continue even when nobody understands. The old you needed evidence before believing. The new you is learning to believe while the evidence is still forming. That is why this next season cannot be approached with the same mindset that carried you through the previous one. God is not bringing you forward so you can repeat old patterns in a new environment. He is bringing you forward because you have learned something. You have learned patience. You have learned discernment. You have learned that not every delay means denial. You have learned that sometimes God protects you by disappointing you. You have learned that rejection can redirect you toward something more aligned. You have learned that the person who walked away may have unknowingly created room for the person who is actually meant to stand beside you. You have learned that what looked like an ending can become the beginning of a chapter you never imagined. And now God is saying, watch this. Watch how the pieces begin to connect. Watch how something you thought was completely unrelated suddenly becomes relevant. Watch how an old prayer begins to receive a new answer. Watch how something you stopped asking for begins appearing in a form you did not expect. Watch how the thing that once broke your confidence becomes part of the testimony that strengthens someone else. Watch how the season that made you cry privately becomes the season you later thank God for surviving. Chosen one, there are things happening that you cannot yet see. That is the hardest part for a person who has spent years learning to rely on visible evidence. You want proof. You want confirmation. You want a sign. You want something tangible that says, eyes, this is really happening. But sometimes faith is standing at the edge of the next chapter before the first sentence has been written. Sometimes faith is waking up and continuing when you do not feel inspired. Sometimes faith is saying, I do not understand this, but I refuse to believe that my life has no purpose. Sometimes faith is choosing peace while circumstances are still chaotic. Sometimes faith is refusing to let temporary conditions determine permanent expectations. And sometimes faith is simply watching. So watch. Watch without jealousy. Watch without comparison. Watch without rushing. Watch without announcing everything. There are things God will do in your life that are better protected by silence during their early stages. Not everyone needs to know what you are praying about. Not everyone needs access to your plans. Not everyone deserves to hear about the doors you are hoping will open. Some dreams need quiet before they need an audience. Some seeds need darkness before they become visible. Some transformations happen underground. A seed does not look impressive while it is beneath the soil. But that does not mean nothing is happening. Roots are forming. Structure is developing. Life is beginning where human eyes cannot see it. That may be what is happening in your life right now. You are looking at the ground and saying, nothing is happening. But heaven may be saying, look again. Roots are forming. Character is developing. Connections are being arranged. Timing is being prepared. Your capacity is increasing. Your discernment is sharpening. Your heart is becoming strong enough to carry what you have been asking for. Chosen one, do not despise this invisible stage. Do not curse the season because it does not look dramatic. Some of the greatest changes in your life will begin quietly. A conversation, an idea, a chance meeting, a message, an unexpected opportunity. A decision to finally stop doing something that has been draining you. A decision to finally start doing something you have been postponing. A door that appears ordinary but leads somewhere extraordinary. You may not recognize the significance at first. That is why you must watch. Pay attention. Be present. Do not allow disappointment to make you blind to opportunity. Do not allow exhaustion to make you ignore the small signs of progress. Do not become so focused on the destination that you fail to notice that you are already moving. Chosen one, perhaps you have been asking God for a miracle, while He has been teaching you how to recognize the miracle when it arrives. Perhaps you have been praying for restoration, while He has been restoring your ability to trust. Perhaps you have been asking for abundance, while He has been teaching you stewardship. Perhaps you have been asking for influence, while He has been teaching you humility. Perhaps you have been asking for love while He has been teaching you what healthy love is not. Perhaps you have been asking for a new beginning while He has been teaching you how to stop returning to the old one. Everything has a lesson. Everything has a season. Everything has a purpose when surrendered to God. And now, chosen one, you are standing at the intersection between what you survived and what you are becoming. That intersection can feel strange. You are no longer who you were, but you have not fully stepped into who you are becoming. You may feel caught between identities. You may no longer fit where you once belonged. Old conversations may no longer satisfy you. Old habits may no longer feel comfortable. Old environments may begin to feel too small. That does not mean something is wrong with you. It may mean you have grown. A tree does not apologize for becoming taller. A river does not apologize for changing its course. A butterfly does not return to the cocoon because someone misses the way it used to look. And you do not need permission to become who God has been preparing you to become. Chosen one, some people will only recognize the version of you that benefited them. When you change, they may call you distant. When you establish boundaries, they may call you selfish. When you become disciplined, they may call you boring. When you stop participating in chaos, they may accuse you of thinking you are better than them. Do not let misunderstanding make you abandon growth. You are not required to shrink so that someone else can remain comfortable. You are not required to return to dysfunction because someone misses your availability. You are not required to reopen doors that God helped you close. There is a time to love people from a distance. There is a time to forgive without returning. There is a time to release without hatred. There is a time to bless someone and continue walking. And there is a time to stop explaining. God knows your heart. That is enough. Chosen one, the next thing God is showing you may not arrive in the form you expected. This is important. Do not become so attached to the method that you miss the answer. You prayed for a door, but perhaps God gives you a key. You prayed for a person, but perhaps God first gives you healing. You prayed for a new environment, but perhaps God first changes your perspective. You prayed for immediate success, but perhaps God first gives you discipline. You prayed for clarity, but perhaps God first removes the distractions that were preventing you from hearing clearly. The answer may look different from the picture you created, but different does not mean wrong. Sometimes God answers beyond your imagination. Sometimes the blessing is larger than the request. Sometimes the answer requires you to release your attachment to how you thought the story had to unfold. That is why God says, watch this. Because if you already knew exactly what he was going to do, you would not need faith. Chosen one, there is something else you need to understand. You are not behind. Stop comparing your timeline to people whose assignment is different from yours. Someone else may have received something sooner. That does not mean they received something better. Someone else may look farther ahead. That does not mean you are late. Someone else may have more visible success. That does not mean your life lacks significance. You cannot compare your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 15. You cannot compare your private preparation to another person's public results. You cannot compare your beginning to someone else's middle. And you cannot measure God's work in your life by another person's calendar. Your journey has its own timing. Your lessons have their own order. Your doors have their own keys. Your assignment has its own demands, so breathe. You are not late. You are learning. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. You are not empty. You are being filled with something deeper than temporary applause. And you are not alone just because you are walking through a quiet season. There is a difference between being alone and being abandoned. Sometimes solitude is where you hear what noise prevented you from hearing. Sometimes the quiet is where conviction becomes clear. Sometimes separation is where identity becomes stronger. Sometimes God removes the crowd because he wants you to discover that your worth was never dependent on the crowd. Chosen one, do not fear the quiet. Watch what happens in the quiet. Watch how your thoughts change. Watch how your desires become simpler. Watch how certain things you once begged for no longer impress you. Watch how peace becomes more valuable than attention. Watch how consistency becomes more attractive than excitement. Watch how truth becomes more important than popularity. Watch how your definition of success begins to change. That transformation is evidence. You are becoming ready for something different, and when the next door opens, you will not enter it as the same person who stood outside the previous one. You will enter with wisdom. You will enter with patience. You will enter knowing that you do not have to compromise your values to receive what is meant for you. You will enter knowing that not every person who celebrates your success deserves access to your process. You will enter knowing that blessings require responsibility. You will enter knowing that elevation is not merely about being seen. It is about being able to carry what becomes visible. Chosen one, perhaps this is why the season has felt so intense. You were not merely waiting for something to change around you. You were being changed within you. And inner transformation often feels uncomfortable because it requires you to confront things you would rather avoid. Fear, insecurity, pride, impatience, people-pleasing, the need for approval, the need to control outcomes, the habit of assuming the worst, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of starting again, the fear of failing publicly, the fear that if one door closes, another will never open. But God has been challenging those fears one by one. He has been showing you that you can survive uncertainty. He has been showing you that you can survive disappointment. He has been showing you that you can survive people leaving. He has been showing you that you can survive starting over. He has been showing you that your identity is larger than one relationship, one job, one opportunity, one season, one mistake, or one failure. You are still here. That matters. You are still becoming. That matters. You are still capable of believing. That matters. And there is still more ahead. So when God says, "Watch this alone right now," do not interpret the word alone as punishment. Interpret it as an invitation to pay attention. Pay attention to what is changing. Pay attention to what is leaving. Pay attention to what is returning. Pay attention to what no longer has power over you. Pay attention to what suddenly brings you peace. Pay attention to the opportunities that align with your values, instead of merely feeding your ego. Pay attention to the people whose presence brings clarity rather than confusion. Pay attention to the moments when you feel drawn towards something meaningful. Pay attention to the doors that open without manipulation. Pay attention to the doors that repeatedly close despite your effort. There is wisdom in patterns. There is information in peace. There is information in resistance. There is information in timing. And there is wisdom in learning when to move and when to remain still. Chosen one, you do not need to understand everything today. You only need enough light for the next step. You do not need to see the entire road. You need to trust the one who sees it. You do not need to know every detail. You need to remain faithful to what you already know. If the next step is to rest, rest. If the next step is to work, work. If the next step is to apologize, apologize. If the next step is to walk away, walk away. If the next step is to begin again, begin again. If the next step is to wait, wait. But do not confuse waiting with doing nothing. Waiting can be active. Waiting can be preparation. Waiting can be learning. Waiting can be building. Waiting can be healing. Waiting can be becoming. And while you wait, God can be working in places you cannot reach. That is the mystery. That is the beauty. That is the reason you are being told to watch. Because you have reached the point where your greatest move may not be a move at all. It may be trust. It may be silence. It may be patience. It may be refusing to return to what you prayed to escape. It may be staying focused while other people become distracted. It may be continuing to build when nobody is applauding. It may be choosing integrity when compromise would be easier. It may be believing that your story is still being written even though the current page feels difficult. Chosen one day you may look back at this exact season differently. The things that frustrate you now may become the things you are grateful for later. The closed door may become protection. The unanswered message may become freedom. The canceled opportunity may become redirection. The lonely night may become the moment you discovered your strength. The rejection may become the reason you found your true path. The delay may become the reason you were ready when the opportunity finally arrived. You cannot see all of that from where you are standing, but you do not have to. You are not being asked to see the entire picture. You are being asked to keep watching, keep listening, keep growing, keep praying, keep becoming, keep moving when movement is required, keep resting when rest is required, keep your heart open without giving everyone access to it, keep your standards high without becoming bitter, keep your faith alive without demanding that everything happen on your schedule. Because something is changing, something is forming, something is approaching, and before you recognize it, the thing you thought was merely another ordinary day may become that you realize that everything was beginning to turn. Chosen one, this is why you must not give up in the middle. The middle is where many people quit. They leave before the breakthrough becomes visible. They stop before the seed becomes a plant. They walk away because the process takes longer than expected. But you are being taught endurance. You are being taught how to remain steady when emotions fluctuate. You are being taught how to continue when motivation disappears. You are being taught how to trust without constant confirmation. And perhaps that is the greatest preparation of all. Because when your next chapter begins, there may be moments when you still have to exercise faith. The blessing does not eliminate responsibility. The open door does not eliminate challenges. The new season does not mean every day will be easy, but you will be different. You will know how to navigate. You will know how to listen. You will know how to pause. You will know how to recognize what deserves your energy. You will know that peace is not something you trade for temporary approval, and you will remember this season. You will remember the nights when you wondered if anything was happening. You will remember the days when you felt invisible. You will remember the prayers you whispered when nobody else knew what you were carrying. You will remember how many times you almost gave up, and then you will understand why you had to keep going. Not because every moment was pleasant, not because every answer came quickly, not because every person stayed, but because something was being built inside you that could not have been built through comfort alone. Chosen one, stay there for a moment. Do not rush past this. Let yourself recognize how far you have already come. You have survived things you once thought would destroy you. You have walked through seasons you never imagined you would endure. You have lost things and still found reasons to continue. You have been disappointed and still found a way to hope. You have cried and still gotten up. You have been uncertain and still taken another step. That is not weakness. That is endurance. That is evidence that your story is not finished. And if your story is not finished, then do not make a permanent decision based on a temporary chapter. Do not quit because today is difficult. Do not surrender your future because yesterday hurt. Do not close your heart forever because one person mishandled it. Do not abandon your purpose because one opportunity failed. Do not assume the worst simply because you cannot see the next step. There is more. There is always more to discover when you are willing to keep walking. And right now, God is saying, watch this. Watch how your perspective changes. Watch how your environment changes. Watch how your priorities change. Watch how your confidence becomes quieter but stronger. Watch how you stop needing to announce every victory. Watch how you become comfortable allowing results to speak. Watch how you stop chasing validation and start building substance. Watch how you become more selective with your time. Watch how you become more protective of your peace. Watch how you become less impressed by appearances and more attentive to character. Watch how the things that once controlled you begin losing their grip. Watch how you become able to say no without guilt. Watch how you become able to say yes without fear. Watch how you begin to recognize the difference between an opportunity and a distraction. Watch how you begin to recognize the difference between chemistry and compatibility. Watch how you begin to recognize the difference between attention and genuine care. Watch how you begin to recognize the difference between being busy and being productive. Watch how you begin to recognize the difference between movement and progress. And above all, watch how your relationship with God becomes less about demanding signs and more about developing trust. Because the greatest transformation may not be what God gives you. It may be who you become while receiving it. Chosen one. There will come a moment when you realize that the old version of you would have handled this season differently. You would have panicked. You would have chased. You would have over-explained. You would have settled. You would have accepted less. You would have returned to what was familiar simply because it was familiar. But now you are learning to wait for what is right rather than grabbing what is available. That is growth. That is maturity. That is preparation. And perhaps that is exactly why God has been so quiet. Because He wanted you to hear something deeper than an answer. He wanted you to hear your own heart again. He wanted you to rediscover the part of yourself that became buried beneath disappointment. He wanted you to remember that your life can still have meaning after an ending. He wanted you to understand that being alone for a season does not mean being alone forever. He wanted you to realize that the silence was not empty. It was full of lessons, full of preparation, full of hidden movement, full of things you will eventually understand. So chosen one, watch. Do not look away because the first sign is small. Do not dismiss the beginning because it does not resemble the final picture. Do not reject the seed because you wanted the tree immediately. Do not call it nothing simply because it is not everything yet. There are beginnings that look insignificant until time reveals their importance. There are conversations that seem ordinary until years later you realize they changed your direction. There are decisions that seem small until they completely alter your future. There are moments that pass quietly but carry enormous consequences. And perhaps you are closer than you realize. Perhaps the thing you have been praying about has already started moving. Perhaps the first piece is already in place. Perhaps the person you need to meet is already walking toward the same intersection. Perhaps the opportunity you need is already being prepared. Perhaps the answer is closer than your current emotions allow you to believe. But whether it happens tomorrow or later, your assignment remains the same. Stay ready. Stay grounded. Stay discerning. Stay faithful. Stay humble. Stay willing to learn. Stay willing to change. Stay willing to let go. Stay willing to begin. And when God says move, move. When He says wait, wait. When He says release, release. When He says watch, watch. Because there are moments when the greatest evidence of faith is not what you say. It is what you refuse to do out of fear. You refuse to chase. You refuse to settle. You refuse to compromise. You refuse to return. You refuse to panic. You refuse to believe that the current chapter is the entire story. Chosen one, something is being revealed to you even now. Maybe not in the way you expected. Maybe not through a dramatic event. Maybe through a quiet realization. Maybe through a change in your heart. Maybe through the sudden peace you feel about something that once caused you anxiety. Maybe through your growing ability to let go. Maybe through the courage to finally admit that what you wanted was not what you needed. Maybe through the understanding that God was protecting you from an answer you were not ready to carry. Whatever form it takes, do not rush past it. Pay attention. Because the moment you recognize the lesson, you become ready for the next level of the journey. And there is more waiting beyond this moment. More than you can currently see. More than you can currently measure. More than your present circumstances can explain. The chapter is still moving. The story is still unfolding. The pieces are still being arranged. And while you are tempted to ask, when will it happen? There is another question you may need to ask. Who am I becoming while I wait? Because that question changes everything. It takes your attention away from the clock and places it back on your character. It takes your attention away from comparison and places it back on your calling. It takes your attention away from what others have and places it back on what you are building. It takes your attention away from fear and places it back on faith. And perhaps that is the very thing God has been trying to show you all along. You were so focused on what was going to happen next that you almost missed what was happening inside you right now. You were so focused on the door that you almost missed the preparation of the person who would walk through it. You were so focused on the blessing that you almost missed the transformation. You were so focused on the answer that you almost missed the relationship with the one who was guiding you toward it. So breathe, chosen one. Be still long enough to recognize the movement. Be quiet long enough to hear the instruction. Be patient long enough to see what develops. Be courageous enough to release what no longer belongs. Be wise enough not to announce everything. Be humble enough to keep learning. And be ready, because when the moment arrives, you may suddenly understand why God kept saying, "Watch this. A chosen one, do not look away now." Because sometimes the moment before a shift is the moment when doubt becomes the loudest. Sometimes, just before something changes, everything around you seems to suggest that nothing will ever change. That is where many people lose their focus. They look at the present and make a permanent judgment about the future. They look at one unanswered prayer and decide that prayer does not work. They look at one closed door and decide that no door will ever open. They look at one disappointment and decide that every opportunity will end the same way. But you cannot judge an entire story from one page. You cannot judge the harvest by looking at one seed. You cannot judge the sunrise by looking at the darkness before dawn. There are moments when darkness is not proof that morning has failed to arrive. It is simply evidence that morning has not yet become visible. And chosen one, you are learning to recognize the difference. You are learning not to panic simply because you cannot see. You are learning not to abandon your position because the answer has taken longer than expected. You are learning not to let temporary silence convince you that heaven has become silent forever. There are things you cannot see because they are still developing. There are answers you cannot recognize because they are arriving through a different route. There are opportunities you cannot identify because they have not yet taken their final shape. There are people you have not met because the timing of your lives has not yet aligned. There are places you have not entered because you are still being prepared for what that environment will require from you. And there are versions of yourself you have not yet encountered because you are still becoming. So do not rush the process. There is something sacred about becoming. You are not simply waiting for life to happen to you. You are becoming the person who can respond differently when life does happen. That is why your patience matters. That is why your discipline matters. That is why your choices matter when nobody is watching. That is why your private decisions matter more than public appearances. Because what you do when nobody is applauding is shaping the person who will eventually stand in front of everyone. Chosen one, never underestimate the power of private preparation. A house is not built when people move into it. It is built before anyone sees the finished rooms. A foundation is not exciting to look at. Nobody takes pictures of concrete underground and says, "Look how beautiful." But without the foundation, the beautiful structure cannot stand. And perhaps your foundation has been the part of your life you complained about the most. The quiet years, the hidden years, the years when you felt unseen, the seasons when nobody recognized your effort, the moments when you wondered why you had to struggle while others seemed to move effortlessly. But what if the hidden years were not wasted? What if they were the foundation? What if the reason you could not move quickly was because God was making sure that when you finally moved, you would not collapse under the weight of what came with you? Think about that. Maybe the delay was not punishment. Maybe the delay was mercy. Maybe God knew what you were asking for, but He also knew what that request would require. You wanted the platform. He wanted to build your character. You wanted the relationship. He wanted to heal your understanding of love. You wanted the money. He wanted to teach you stewardship. You wanted recognition. He wanted to teach you humility. You wanted influence. He wanted to teach you responsibility. You wanted immediate elevation. He wanted to make sure your roots could hold you there. Chosen one, sometimes the blessing is not delayed because God is reluctant. Sometimes it is delayed because the person receiving it is still being prepared, and preparation can feel painfully slow. But slow does not mean inactive. A person can be growing even when nobody can see the growth. A person can be healing while still having difficult days. A person can be becoming stronger while still feeling weak. A person can be moving forward while it looks like they are standing still. You need to stop measuring your progress only by visible outcomes. Look at your reactions. Look at your thinking. Look at your standards. Look at your patience. Look at what no longer tempts you. Look at what you no longer tolerate. Look at the conversations you no longer need. Look at the things you used to chase that no longer impress you. Look at the peace you have gained. That is progress. Chosen one, there was a time when you needed everyone to understand your heart. Now you are learning that God understanding your heart is enough. There was a time when you needed people to apologize before you could move on. Now you are learning that sometimes closure comes from accepting that the apology may never come. There was a time when you needed someone to choose you before you could believe you were valuable. Now you are learning to choose yourself in healthy ways. There was a time when rejection made you question your identity. Now you are learning that rejection may simply mean the wrong environment could not accommodate the person you were becoming. That is growth, and growth often looks like loss before it looks like gain. Because when you grow, certain things no longer fit. Certain conversations become uncomfortable. Certain environments become draining. Certain friendships become one-sided. Certain habits become unbearable. Certain forms of entertainment no longer satisfy you. Certain goals lose their shine. That can feel confusing. You may ask, why don't I enjoy this anymore? Because you changed. You may ask, why does this place feel different? Because you changed. You may ask, why am I suddenly uncomfortable with what I used to accept? Because you changed. And chosen one, change is not always loud. Sometimes change is simply the quiet decision not to return. You do not announce it. You do not make a speech. You do not need applause. You simply know. I cannot go back there. That knowing is powerful, because there are places that your old self could survive, but your new self cannot. There are environments where your old identity felt comfortable, because you had not yet recognized your worth. Now you know better. And once you know better, you cannot comfortably pretend you do not. Chosen one, this is why certain doors had to close. You kept asking God to reopen them. But perhaps he was saying, why are you asking me to return you to something I rescued you from? You saw the familiar. He saw the danger. He saw the comfort. He saw the limitation. You saw the person you missed. He saw the pattern that hurt you. You saw the opportunity. He saw the cost. You saw the temporary reward. He saw the long-term consequence. And sometimes God protects you from your own attachment. Because attachment can make you call something destiny simply because you wanted it badly. You can want something sincerely and still be wrong about whether it belongs in your life. That is why surrender matters. Surrender is not giving up on your future. Surrender is releasing your demand that the future look exactly the way you imagined. Chosen one, you are being taught to say, God, I want this, but I trust you more than I trust my own limited understanding. That prayer changes the heart, because now you are no longer worshiping the outcome. You are trusting the process. You are no longer saying, if this does not happen, my life is over. You are saying, if this is right for me, let it come. If it is not, lead me somewhere better. That is freedom. And freedom is one of the greatest gifts you can carry into a new season. Because a person who is desperate will accept almost anything. But a person who is grounded can wait. A desperate person sees every opportunity as the last opportunity. A grounded person understands that one closed door does not mean the end of possibility. A desperate person chases. A grounded person discerns. A desperate person compromises. A grounded person knows that some opportunities are too expensive if the price is peace. Chosen one, protect your peace. Not because you are afraid of people. Not because you believe you are better than anyone. But because peace is necessary for clarity. When your mind is constantly filled with noise, you cannot hear direction clearly. When you are constantly reacting to other people's emotions, you may lose connection with your own convictions. When you are constantly trying to prove yourself, you stop building yourself. When you are constantly watching what everyone else is doing, you lose sight of what you were called to do. So step back, watch. There are seasons when observation is more valuable than participation. You do not have to enter every conversation. You do not have to respond to every opinion. You do not have to defend every decision. You do not have to correct every misunderstanding. Sometimes the most powerful response is to continue living according to your values. Let time reveal what arguments cannot. Let consistency speak where explanations fail. Let your life become the evidence. Chosen one, people may misunderstand you while you are changing. Let them. They do not have to understand your transformation to validate it. Some people only knew the version of you that was accessible to them. They may not understand why you have boundaries now. They may not understand why you are quieter. They may not understand why you no longer respond the same way. They may not understand why you stopped chasing approval. But you are not responsible for maintaining an outdated version of yourself so that others can remain comfortable. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to mature. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to choose differently. You are allowed to leave what no longer aligns with your values. And you are allowed to become unfamiliar even to people who once knew you well. Chosen one, sometimes the greatest sign of healing is that what once triggered you no longer controls you. You may still remember it. You may still understand that it hurt. But you no longer need to relive it every day. You no longer need revenge. You no longer need them to suffer before you can breathe. You simply release. And release is not saying that what happened was acceptable. Release means you refuse to allow what happened to own the rest of your life. You are saying, "You had a chapter in my story, but you do not get to write every chapter." That is powerful. Because there are people who hurt you once and then continue hurting you for years because you keep carrying the event. But God is teaching you to put it down. Not because it did not matter. Because you matter too much to keep carrying it forever. Chosen one, watch what happens when you stop carrying what was never yours. Watch how your energy returns. Watch how your creativity returns. Watch how your joy begins to return. Watch how your ability to dream begins to return. Watch how your mind becomes clearer. Watch how your future begins to feel possible again. Sometimes you do not need a new life. You need freedom from the old weight. And when that weight is removed, you discover that there was more life inside you than you realized. That is why God has been taking you through a process of release. Release the guilt. Release the resentment. Release the need to control. Release the need to know everything. Release the need to have every answer today. Release the need to make everyone understand. Release the need to know exactly when the promise will arrive. You can release the timeline without releasing the faith. You can release the method without releasing the hope. You can release the person without releasing your capacity to love. You can release the old dream without releasing your ability to dream again. Chosen one, there is something beautiful about beginning again with wisdom. The first time, you may have begun with excitement. The second time, you may begin with understanding. You know what matters now. You know what is not. You know what kind of treatment you will no longer accept. You know which habits destroy your momentum. You know which environments make you smaller. You know which voices strengthen your faith and which voices feed your fear. You know the difference between genuine opportunity and empty attention. That knowledge has value. Do not wish you could return to the person you were before you learned these lessons. You may miss the innocence. You may miss the simplicity. But wisdom is not something you should throw away simply because it came through difficult experiences. Use what you learned. Let the pain become discernment instead of bitterness. Let the disappointment become wisdom instead of cynicism. Let the rejection become direction instead of insecurity. Let the waiting become patience instead of resentment. Let the solitude become strength instead of isolation. Chosen one, you have to understand that your future cannot be built from fear. Fear will tell you to take whatever is available. Faith will tell you to wait for what is aligned. Fear will tell you that everyone is leaving. Faith will tell you that the right people do not require you to abandon yourself. Fear will tell you that you are running out of time. Faith will tell you that your journey is not controlled by comparison. Fear will tell you to force the door. Faith will tell you to knock, discern, and if it does not open, keep walking. Fear makes everything urgent. Wisdom understands timing. That is why you must become careful with urgency. Not every urgent feeling is a divine instruction. Sometimes anxiety sounds like urgency. Sometimes insecurity sounds like ambition. Sometimes loneliness sounds like love. Sometimes ego sounds like destiny. Sometimes fear sounds like intuition. This is why discernment matters. Pause, ask, observe. Do not let one emotional moment determine a permanent decision. Chosen one, your emotions are real, but they are not always instructions. You can feel afraid and still move wisely. You can feel lonely and still refuse to settle. You can feel impatient and still wait. You can feel disappointed and still remain hopeful. You can feel uncertain and still take the next responsible step. You do not have to feel perfect to move forward. You simply have to remain honest, and God can work with an honest heart. You can say, I am afraid. I do not understand. I am tired. I do not know what comes next. I need help. I need wisdom. Those words do not make you weak. They make you honest, and honesty creates space for growth. Chosen one, there are moments when you may feel like you have nothing left, but perhaps you have more than you think. You have experience. You have lessons. You have discernment. You have survived. You have learned. You have developed endurance. You have discovered what matters. You have discovered what does not. You have become more aware of yourself, and you still have breath. That means there is still possibility. As long as you are still here, there are decisions you can make. There are habits you can change. There are doors you can knock on. There are relationships you can repair. There are boundaries you can establish. There are skills you can develop. There are dreams you can revisit. There are prayers you can pray differently. There are steps you can take. The future is not asking you to know everything. It is asking you to participate. Chosen one. Sometimes we pray for God to change everything while refusing to change the one thing we control, our next decision. You may not control who leaves, but you can control whether you chase them. You may not control who misunderstands you, but you can control whether you abandon your values to prove yourself. You may not control the timing, but you can control what you do with the waiting. You may not control the past, but you can control what you carry forward. You may not control every circumstance, but you can choose your response, and your response is powerful. Because one wise decision repeated over time can transform an entire life. One boundary can change a relationship. One habit can change your health and energy. One skill can change your opportunities. One conversation can change your direction. One decision to stop returning to the same destructive cycle can change your future. Do not underestimate small obedience. Do not underestimate small beginnings. Do not underestimate one faithful step. Chosen one, you may be waiting for a dramatic sign while God is watching what you do with ordinary opportunities. How do you treat people when there is nothing to gain? How do you work when nobody is watching? How do you handle money when you have little? How do you handle power when you have some? How do you speak about people who are not present? How do you respond when you are disappointed? How do you behave when your plans fail? How do you treat yourself when you make a mistake? These moments reveal character, and character matters because opportunity magnifies what is already inside you. If you are impatient before success, success will not automatically make you patient. If you are insecure before recognition, recognition may not remove insecurity. If you are reckless before abundance, abundance may simply give recklessness more resources. That is why preparation matters. God is not merely interested in giving you more. He is interested in making sure that more does not destroy you. Chosen one, think about that the next time you wonder why something has not arrived. Maybe you are not being denied. Maybe you are being protected. Maybe there are details you cannot see. Maybe the opportunity would have arrived before your foundation was ready. Maybe the relationship would have arrived before your healing was complete. Maybe the money would have arrived before your discipline. Maybe the platform would have arrived before your character could handle the pressure. Maybe the influence would have arrived before you understood responsibility. Maybe the answer would have arrived before you learned discernment. And perhaps God loved you enough to say, not yet, not never, not impossible, not forgotten, just not yet. Those two words can be difficult when you want now, but sometimes, not yet, is the language of preparation. Chosen one, learn to respect the power of timing. There are fruits that cannot be rushed without damaging the fruit. There are seasons that cannot be skipped without losing the lessons. There are relationships that cannot be forced without destroying the foundation. There are opportunities that require preparation before they become sustainable. Timing matters. You may not understand it while you are inside it, but someday you may look back and realize that the delay saved you from entering too early. And then you will thank God for the door that did not open when you wanted it to. You will understand why the phone did not ring, why the message did not come, why the opportunity disappeared, why the relationship ended, why the plan failed, why the move was delayed, why the money did not arrive, why the path changed. Because sometimes the protection is hidden inside the disappointment. Chosen one, never assume that every closed door is an enemy. Some closed doors are guardians. Some endings are boundaries. Some delays are shields. Some disappointments are rescue missions. And some unanswered prayers are actually answers that you were not ready to recognize. So watch. Watch what God does after you stop forcing. Watch what appears after you release. Watch who comes into your life after you stop chasing the wrong people. Watch what opportunities become visible after you clear your schedule. Watch how your mind changes after you stop consuming constant negativity. Watch how your creativity returns after you stop comparing yourself. Watch how your confidence grows after you keep promises to yourself. Watch how your life begins to feel different when your private world becomes healthier. Chosen one, this is where the transformation becomes practical. You cannot only wait for something supernatural. You have to cooperate with what is being built within you. If you are praying for a new season, prepare for it. If you are asking for greater responsibility, become responsible now. If you are asking for opportunity, develop your skills now. If you are asking for healthier relationships, learn healthy communication now. If you are asking for peace, stop feeding every source of chaos. If you are asking for discipline, create disciplined routines before the opportunity arrives. If you are asking for influence, learn how to serve before people begin listening. If you are asking for abundance, learn how to manage what you already have. Do not wait for the blessing to begin behaving like the person who can carry it. Start becoming now. Chosen one, your future self is being formed by today's choices. The person you will become next year is being influenced by what you repeatedly do today. That is why your ordinary days matter. The morning nobody sees matters. The work nobody praises matters. The prayer nobody hears matters. The temptation you resist matters. The boundary you maintain matters. The habit you build matters. The person you choose to forgive matters. The decision to keep going matters. You may think these moments are too small to change your life, but life is made of small moments. A direction is formed by repeated steps. A character is formed by repeated choices. A reputation is formed by repeated behavior. A future is formed by repeated decisions. So do not wait for one giant moment to save you. Build, learn, practice, grow. Prepare and keep watching. Because sometimes the miracle is not that everything changes overnight. Sometimes the miracle is that you become strong enough to change what you can influence, patient enough to accept what you cannot, and wise enough to know the difference. Chosen one, there will be days when you feel impatient again. Do not condemn yourself, you are human. There will be days when you wonder whether anything is happening. There will be days when comparison returns. There will be days when the old fears knock on the door. There will be days when you miss people you know you should not return to. There will be days when you question the path. That does not mean you have failed. Growth is not a straight line. You may take 3 steps forward and have one difficult day. That difficult day does not erase the 3 steps. You may feel discouraged after months of progress. That feeling does not mean your progress disappeared. You may remember something painful. Remembering is not the same as returning. You may miss someone. Missing them does not mean they belong in your future. You may feel afraid. Fear does not mean you must stop. You may feel uncertain. Uncertainty does not mean there is no direction. Keep going. Keep watching. Keep listening. Keep discerning. Chosen one, you are not required to have perfect faith every day. Sometimes faith looks like a whisper. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed. Sometimes it looks like taking one responsible step. Sometimes it looks like refusing to make a destructive decision while emotional. Sometimes it looks like saying, I will wait until I am calm. Sometimes it looks like asking for wisdom before responding. Sometimes it looks like resting instead of forcing. Faith does not always look dramatic. Sometimes faith looks ordinary, and ordinary faith, practiced consistently, can create extraordinary transformation. Chosen one, there is something else you need to remember. Do not confuse visibility with significance. Some of the most important work in your life may never be publicly celebrated. You may help someone and never receive recognition. You may make a sacrifice nobody understands. You may choose integrity and lose an opportunity. You may walk away from something profitable because it violates your values. You may refuse to participate in something everyone else is doing. There may be no applause, but heaven sees what people do not. Your value does not rise and fall according to public attention. You do not become more important because more people know your name. You do not become less important because fewer people notice you. Your worth existed before the applause. Your purpose existed before the platform. Your value existed before the recognition. Remember that when the world becomes loud. Chosen one, perhaps God has kept you hidden because He wanted you to learn how to be secure without being constantly seen. There is strength in being able to build quietly. There is strength in not needing to announce every move. There is strength in being comfortable with your own company. There is strength in knowing who you are when nobody is validating you. Because if your identity depends entirely on attention, you become controlled by whoever gives or removes that attention. But when your identity is grounded, you can receive praise without becoming addicted to it, and receive criticism without being destroyed by it. You can listen without losing yourself. You can celebrate others without comparing yourself. You can learn from correction without collapsing. You can walk away from rejection without deciding that you are worthless. That is freedom, and perhaps that is one of the things God has been building in you during this hidden season. Chosen one, watch how different your future becomes when you stop making decisions from the fear of being left out. You will stop accepting invitations that drain you. You will stop spending money simply to impress. You will stop saying yes because you are afraid someone will be disappointed. You will stop returning to people because silence feels uncomfortable. You will stop chasing relationships simply because you are afraid of being alone. You will stop choosing short-term comfort over long-term peace. You will stop sacrificing your future to protect someone else's temporary feelings. That is when your life begins to become intentional. And intentional living creates room for meaningful things. Your calendar changes, your conversations change, your priorities change, your environment changes, your standards change, your future changes. Not because one dramatic event happened, but because you started making different decisions. Chosen one, this is why you cannot despise the season of preparation. Preparation is where the roots deepen. Preparation is where the foundation strengthens. Preparation is where you learn to say no. Preparation is where you learn patience. Preparation is where you learn how to manage disappointment. Preparation is where you learn how to keep going without applause. Preparation is where you learn how to trust without seeing everything. And when the moment comes, you will be grateful that you did not waste the waiting. You will realize that every day was teaching you something. Every disappointment was sharpening something. Every delay was revealing something. Every ending was creating space for something. Every lonely moment was teaching you something about yourself. Every challenge was exposing an area where you needed growth. And every time you thought you were simply surviving, you were also becoming. Chosen one, there is a version of you on the other side of this season that will understand things the current version cannot yet understand. That version of you will look back and say, I thought I was being buried, but I was being planted. I thought I was being rejected, but I was being redirected. I thought I was losing everything, but I was being freed. I thought nothing was happening, but everything was happening beneath the surface. I thought God was silent, but I was learning to listen. I thought I was alone, but I was being strengthened. I thought the delay was destroying me, but the delay was developing me. And chosen one, that realization may come sooner than you think, but whether it comes soon or later, do not abandon the process. Stay with it, stay present, stay teachable, stay willing, stay faithful to the next right step. There is no need to know the entire route today. You only need to know what is required of you today. Take care of what is in your hands. Be faithful with what you already have. Use what you already know. Learn what you do not know. Repair what you can repair. Release what you cannot control. And keep your eyes open. Because the instruction is still the same. Watch. Watch what happens when you stop chasing. Watch what happens when you stop forcing. Watch what happens when you stop returning. Watch what happens when you become disciplined. Watch what happens when you protect your peace. Watch what happens when you trust the process. Watch what happens when you become comfortable with waiting. Watch what happens when you stop demanding that everyone understand you. Watch what happens when you finally decide that your future deserves more attention than your past. Chosen one, there are still things being arranged. There are still lessons being completed. There are still connections being formed. There are still opportunities taking shape. There are still doors that have not appeared. There are still prayers whose answers are developing. There are still parts of you that are becoming stronger. And there is still more for you to see. So do not look away. Do not become distracted by what is temporary. Do not become discouraged by what is incomplete. Do not become obsessed with what someone else is doing. Your assignment is in front of you. Your next step is in front of you. Your growth is in front of you. And somewhere beyond what you can currently see, another chapter is beginning to take shape. You may not recognize the first sign. It may arrive quietly. It may look ordinary. It may even look unrelated to what you have been praying for. But stay awake. Stay discerning. Stay ready, because sometimes God does not announce the beginning of a new chapter. Sometimes He simply gives you one small opportunity, one unexpected conversation, one unusual opening, one quiet realization, and watches to see whether you have become wise enough to recognize what is happening. And chosen one, when that moment comes, you cannot be so attached to yesterday that you miss tomorrow. You cannot be so focused on what hurt you that you fail to recognize what is healing you. You cannot be so afraid of another disappointment that you reject every possibility. You cannot allow yesterday's betrayal to become tomorrow's prison. You cannot let one failed relationship define your understanding of every future relationship. You cannot let one financial setback convince you that abundance is impossible. You cannot let one rejection become your identity. You cannot let one mistake become your prophecy. There is still room for growth. There is still room for restoration. There is still room for wisdom. There is still room for new beginnings. And while you are waiting for the next visible sign, keep becoming the person who will recognize it when it arrives. Because the next door may not look like the door you expected. The next opportunity may require courage. The next relationship may require vulnerability. The next assignment may require discipline. The next level may require you to leave behind habits you once considered normal. The next season may demand a version of you that your previous season did not require. And that is why you have been changing. That is why your perspective has been shifting. That is why your standards have been rising. That is why certain things no longer satisfy you. That is why certain environments feel too small. That is why your heart keeps telling you there must be more. There is more to learn. There is more to build. There is more to experience. There is more to become. And chosen one, perhaps the most important thing you can do right now is stop trying to force the future to reveal itself before it is ready. Let tomorrow remain tomorrow. Let the next chapter remain the next chapter. Take today's step. Do today's work. Pray today's prayer. Make today's decision. Rest when you need to rest. Learn when you need to learn. Move when you need to move. Wait when you need to wait. And watch. Because the same God who brought you through what you thought you could not survive is not suddenly confused about where you are going. The same God who sustained you when you had little can sustain you while you prepare for more. The same God who gave you strength in your weakest moments can continue strengthening you now. The same God who carried you through the chapter you thought would never end can lead you into a chapter you cannot yet imagine. So when doubt whispers, remember what you survived. When fear speaks, remember what you learned. When comparison speaks, remember that your timeline is not theirs. When impatience speaks, remember that preparation has a purpose. When loneliness speaks, remember that solitude can be a season, not a sentence. And when you are tempted to give up because you cannot see what is happening, remember the instruction. Watch. Watch closely. Because sometimes the greatest changes begin when nothing around you appears to be changing. Sometimes the answer begins as a thought. Sometimes the breakthrough begins as a decision. Sometimes the new season begins with a goodbye. Sometimes the new opportunity begins with an ending. Sometimes the restoration begins when you finally stop trying to restore what was never meant to return. Sometimes the next chapter begins when you finally close the previous one without looking back every 5 minutes. And sometimes the greatest evidence that God has been working is not that your circumstances suddenly became perfect, but that you are no longer the same person who once believed those circumstances controlled your entire future. You have grown. You have learned. You have endured. You have become more discerning. And now, chosen one, you are standing closer to something new than you realize. But before you step into it, there are still things you must understand. There are still patterns you must recognize. There are still voices you must learn to distinguish. There are still temptations you must refuse. There are still decisions you must make. And there is still one question you need to ask yourself when the next door finally appears. Will you recognize it because it looks familiar? Or will you recognize it because it carries peace? Because not everything familiar is safe. Not everything exciting is good. Not everything difficult is wrong. Not everything easy is right. And not every open door is your door. That is why you must keep watching.